Hi everyone, this is Zachateria.
This is Nathan Lee.
We're back with the first episode of the Conservative Pagan podcast. Now, anyone who is pagan has probably run into the situation where people assume you're liberal. And if you're liberal, sometimes if you're not following conventional religious standards, it's assumed that you're pagan. So today we're going to address the conservative pagan? What? That you may have run into. Now,
Hmm.
the first thing I'd like to point out is that as a 50 plus individual, um, I have been around a long time. I've seen trends come and go. Nathaniel was born and raised in the West. I was born and raised in the East. So hopefully, we're going to share some differing perspectives of how this happens and what exactly you can experience. To preface this, I'm going to tell you that I am open with my faith in that if you ask me, I'm not going to lie.
I'm physically conservative as far as that. I'm middle to open minded as far as my faith. Like I'm trying to tell you, I practice the old way. So does she.
And what he's not saying is that if you come up to him and ask him what church he attends, he's going to tell you he's a self excommunicated Catholic and will never admit to practicing the old ways unless and until he knows that you are a practitioner as well. Now, as far as our politics go, both Nathaniel and I do tend to be a little bit more libertarian than flat out conservative. But under no circumstances do either of us tend to be liberal in anything. When people talk to me and they're talking to me about political perspectives, people make very wrong assumptions and assume that I am a quiet Baptist mouse because I was raised that way. My father was a pastor in the Baptist church, so I know very well what those behaviors and attitudes are, and I'm able to mimic them pretty much at will. I usually don't bother, but I do get mistaken for Baptist by some of the people who know me from a situation where they're more exposed to my political and social ideology. Nathaniel, how do people see you?
Uh, they see me with a wide berth because even though I'm Apache, I'm a descendant of Geronimo, and I'm a self excommunicated missionary Catholic. But uh, um, I'm physically very conservative and uh, more on the conservative side of my political spectrum. I'm a Reaganite.
Honestly, between the two of us, Nathaniel tends to be a little bit more conservative than I do about many issues. Now, socially, we both agree that the government needs to stay out of our life.
Get the heck out.
We don't want any intrusion or any regulation. I go far to say that I don't believe that marriage is something that the government should be involved in. I think a marriage license is something completely beyond the purview of government. Nathaniel, on the other hand, tends to say no, they've got a standard to uphold, and without the marriage license process, we would have some trouble.
Yeah.
So we do have a wide variety of views here. Now, one of the things that I find is that when one of the people that I am around knows me in a more political manner, they make the assumption that I'm with the Baptist church. And honestly, I don't get in people's faces with my belief system because I don't feel that it's any of their business, and I wouldn't want them getting in my face, so I don't get in theirs.
Exactly.
Um but the people who know me because they know that I'm a pagan make the opposite assumption and assume that I'm liberal. One of the people who I was fairly close to knew that I was pagan, made the assumption I was liberal, and they made a comment that was politically very liberal and expected me to agree, and was shocked when I didn't and expressed an opposing point of view. And today I want to talk about how that happens and can you truly be conservative and pagan? What have you experienced?
I never had because I'm reserved and quiet. I've never had a big thing as far as that. Um, Most people think I'm number one white and I'm a Native American. Um, and because of my size, they've always given me plenty of leeway.
Okay.
But I am definitely um, on the conservative side of things in life. And people that know me know I'm fiercely loyal to good friends and family, and extremely supportive of friends and family. So if you're lucky enough to hit my inner circle, I'm very, 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 very loyal.
Now, in California, have you seen and experienced people assuming that pagans are liberal?
Yes, a lot of, especially I was in the music scene, the LA club scene, Whiskey a Go Go, Rainbow, Bar and Grill, Troubadour, etc. And most of them guys are at least middle of the road, more and more on the liberal side than I ever was.
Did
Um,
people make assumptions that because you were there, you were liberal?
yes, you get a lot of that. Especially, I did some work in Hollywood too. It's the same area. Um, a little bit extra work, a little bit of some small roles and stuff like that. And as you know, especially right back in the '80s, it wasn't. It was a different culture back then because Reagan was ending his era, and the country was still more conservative than it is now.
Okay. Now, we live very quietly and we stay to ourselves. I have to admit that if somebody from my neighborhood were to be asked if Nathaniel and I were church going people, they'd probably say no. But at the same time, if you asked them, they wouldn't know what we were.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to do here on this podcast is bring up these issues of following the old ways in a modern world. Not all of us can be flagrantly out there with our religious and spiritual
No,
choices.
it's
There are a lot of reasons not to. For example, I used to work for a company where if I showed any pagan instincts or pagan um, artistry or anything like that publicly, I could have lost my job. And that is still around. Now, theoretically, it's illegal, but you and I both know, Nathaniel, that illegal doesn't necessarily mean
no,
not done.
oh, I've seen it done. I've had it actually done to me a couple times over the
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. So there are reasons why you may not want to be open with your spirituality or your religious choices. And that's one of the topics that we're going to cover in this podcast. But today I want to focus on how do you walk that line? You're conservative, but you're pagan. How can these two things be true? So many people believe that there's no such thing as a conservative pagan. In my experience, that is a very narrow minded thing because pagans are people from across all walks of life, all different types of people with all different types of experience are pagan or have spiritual leanings toward the old ways. Now, when Nathaniel and I met, he was very, very hidden with his spirituality. Um, my sister and I, on the other hand, used to run a coven, and it kind of put a little bit of a stressor in our relationship early on because I didn't have a problem with anybody knowing I was pagan.
Mm.
My sister and I were the high priestesses of the coven, and we were out there publicly, and people knew who we were. There were a lot of people who didn't know that we were part of the coven or led the coven, but we come from a small town, and the people who followed the old ways tend to know each other.
Yeah.
And so we were known in that community. But the community is very quiet about who is and who isn't, and we don't tend to acknowledge one another openly in public. So a lot of people still didn't know. And I was working as an attorney at the time, and it could have been negative for my career if it did become known.
Yeah. I actually never had that problem because of, I guess people were intimidated and because of my size, expected me to be one way, even though listen to me talk, I'm a totally different from what people expect me to be, and much a much higher intelligence than most ex athletes are. So
And that plays into what we're talking about. People have an expectation when they meet you.
yeah,
You are extremely large. You were an athlete and you
yeah,
were a musician at one point in
yeah,
your life.
yeah,
And the people who know that tend to expect you to be one way, and yet you are a completely different way.
yeah,
The same can be true of a pagan
yeah,
or a conservative.
yeah,
You don't know how many people are out there that oh, that person is very, very conservative. So you expect them to be a church going person. Maybe they're not.
yeah.
Now, in one of the things that I hear very frequently when it comes to the oh, you can't be pagan and conservative too argument is that paganism believes that you can do anything that you want. Well, I would argue that that's not exactly true. One of the most popular trends in paganism is to become Wiccan. Wiccans believe in essentially the golden rule.
Yeah.
They call it the Wiccan Rede, where it says, do as you will and harm none. Um, Most pagans and most people who follow the old ways have a moral code that includes that frame of reference and harm none. Um, if you truly believe that all of your actions should bring no harm to another, conservative beliefs and conservative policies are going to come relatively easily to you. For example, a conservative, one of the key tenets of conservative
Mm-hmm.
politics is that the government should remain small, that it has a defined role and should remain within that role. because when government steps outside that role, things happen that are unintended, possibly, but are still very detrimental to individuals and to sections of society. With a conservative, you'll also find a belief system, not always, but you'll also find a belief system of personal responsibility. Stand up for what you believe, stand up for what you do, and take accountability, even for those actions you didn't intend.
True.
That is one of the core tenets of almost all pagan or what we would consider old ways spiritualities.
Yeah.
Um, the only one I can think of that may not hold that, and I think that there's a possibility that it's there. I'm just not familiar with their dogma to know for sure, and that's Satanism. They may not hold that, but I also don't consider that following the old ways, and I'll get into that distinction in a future podcast.
First of all, I'd like to shout out to the National Guard down at the Texas border. Keep up the good work, guys.
I hadn't intended to go there at this point, but definitely, we are strong components of a strong border, both on the southern border and the northern border. One area that's not being spoken of right now, because if a country does not have borders, do you really have a country? And that plays into the whole system of beliefs uh, that we've come to know as the old ways, in that most most practitioners of the old ways tend to be somewhat of a pacifist, but it's not an absolute pacifism. I can't speak for anyone else, but my grandfather, who is one of the ones who was very influential in my belief system, he used to tell me as a child, don't start it, but if someone else starts it, you finish it.
That's why my uncle Ollie was. He was Green Beret during the Marine Green Beret during the war, which is World War II, and a very big influence in my life. Just like my stepmom, who's also same way, and big influence in my life there too.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of defending oneself is separate and distinct from pacifism. Now, I know that there are a lot of pagans who believe in absolute pacifism. That is your right to believe that, and I'm not going to in any way say you're wrong. But that is not my belief, nor is it the belief of most of the pagans and those following the old ways that I've come to know. Most of us believe that self defense is okay, but we don't want to be the aggressor,
Yeah.
which also fits into a conservative frame of mind, in that if you're not out there picking the fight, take care of what's at home. That tends to be a much more conservative view than a
Yeah.
liberal.
Yeah. Much
Um,
more.
Liberalism tends to want to be the parent for everybody, and I don't see how that plays into a belief system following the old ways.
Mm.
Nobody was anybody's parent. Everybody was there to support each other, but it was a hand up and not a handout.
Yeah.
And I really don't believe in a handout.
No.
The core of why am I conservative comes back to, I believe that it is my responsibility to stand accountable for me and my actions, and that should be the rule across the board. And if you're not accountable, then you have some soul searching to do. And I cannot, in good conscience, support anything that dodges accountability. And in my experience, the liberal belief system is ultimately turning over accountability to someone else.
Nope.
And I can't go there.
Neither can I. Not the way I was raised.
The old ways tell you to stand up and encourage you to become a community with those around you and to support one another. And where there is a need, provide for it among the community. It never says ask somebody far away to give you a handout. It should be done locally. And I realize that that sounds like a good idea, something from the 1950s, but I've seen it work.
Yeah.
I've seen it work very well, and I would like to see a return to that. And I realize that in some ways I'm a dreamer.
She is, but yeah, I agree. I would definitely agree with that sentiment. I want to see us go back to. I would take even the '80s right now
you know,
because
there
this is complete. Mm.
there is no dichotomy between being pagan and being conservative. It is a box that many people want to put you in, but don't be afraid to say, I am a pagan or I follow the old ways and I am conservative. It definitely works.
Yeah.
Now, if you are a pagan or you follow the old ways and you are liberal, you are more than welcome here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to warn you that Nathaniel and I both tend to be conservative, him more so than me, on many issues. And anything we discuss is going to come through that prism.
Yeah.
I'd also like to let you know that we do have our videos up on Rumble, YouTube. And we also have a Facebook page. I will be linking those in. This is a work in progress. As I said in our introduction, we're just regular folks. This is not our full time job by any means. And I am not a professional editor. I'm doing the best that I can.
Yep.
Bear with us, and we'll see you next time on the
For
Conservative
Pagan
Pagan podcast.
podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.